Everyone thought Victor Wembanyama would grow up worshiping LeBron James like every other young superstar entering the NBA. But the second LeBron went onto his podcast and started claiming that today's NBA is harder than the era of Michael Jordan, something completely changed. Because according to people around the league, Wemby quietly reached a breaking point. And once his reaction started leaking out behind the scenes, the NBA world instantly realized this was no longer just another basketball debate. This was the beginning of a generational war over the soul of the game itself. The entire controversy exploded after an episode of the Mind the Game podcast where LeBron sat down and essentially argued that playing 82 games in the modern NBA is far more difficult than surviving an 82-game season during the 80s and 90s. According to LeBron, today's spacing, pace, and offensive complexity make modern basketball more physically demanding than the era's older legends constantly glorify. But the internet did not react the way LeBron probably expected. Instead of applause, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Fans everywhere accused him of trying to rewrite basketball history in real time just to strengthen his own GOAT argument against Michael Jordan. And honestly, the criticism only got worse once people started revisiting actual footage and statistics from older eras. Because contrary to LeBron's claims, the NBA during the mid-80s often played at an even faster pace than today's game. Teams sprinted nonstop, physical contact was constant, and defenders were allowed to punish offensive players in ways modern fans can barely imagine. Yet those players were doing it without private chefs, million-dollar recovery systems, cryotherapy chambers, or luxury charter flights. Most teams were flying commercial airlines and sleeping in ordinary hotels while still showing up every night, ready to battle. That's why many fans felt LeBron's comments sounded less like analysis and more like a carefully crafted excuse for the modern load management culture. If today's game is supposedly much harder physically, then suddenly sitting out back-to-back games looks more understandable. But older NBA fans were not buying it for 1 second because they remember watching players like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird play through pain that would sideline many modern stars for weeks. And according to the rumors spreading around league circles, Wembanyama apparently hated the entire narrative. Not because he dislikes LeBron personally, but because Victor grew up studying those older legends obsessively. While most young stars spent their childhoods watching modern highlight reels online, Wemby reportedly spent hours studying classic footage of Jordan, Kareem, Shaq, Duncan, and Hakeem. He did not see those eras as primitive basketball. He saw them as the foundation of greatness itself. That's why people inside the Spurs organization allegedly noticed a visible shift in Victor after LeBron's comments went viral. Because unlike many modern players, Wemby apparently believes today's NBA has become too dependent on foul baiting, flopping, and soft officiating. And according to reports, Victor privately blamed LeBron for helping normalize the theatrical style that dominates the league today. The irony here is honestly unbelievable. LeBron spent years mastering the art of manipulating officiating, exaggerating contact, and controlling narratives around games. But now the younger generation has copied those tricks so aggressively that even LeBron himself seems frustrated by what the league has become. Players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder have turned foul manipulation into a science. During several games against Oklahoma City, LeBron visibly looked furious, watching younger stars use the exact same tactics he helped popularize years earlier. And according to the rumors surrounding Victor, he supposedly viewed those moments as a proof that modern basketball was losing its identity. The breaking point reportedly came when Wemby allegedly said something that instantly spread throughout NBA circles. The so-called king needs to put some respect on the legends. The second fans heard that quote, the internet exploded. Because you almost never hear a 22-year-old player challenge LeBron's authority that directly. But once you understand who mentored Victor Wembanyama, everything suddenly makes perfect sense. Because this entire mentality reportedly comes directly from Greg Popovich. For decades, Popovich has openly criticized the direction modern basketball has taken. He constantly complains about over-reliance on three-pointers, lack of defensive toughness, and the disappearance of old-school fundamentals. And according to insiders, Pop spent years teaching Victor that true greatness comes from mastering physicality, footwork, discipline, and mental toughness, like not just flashy perimeter scoring, and honestly, you can. Is that Victor is not just talking. His numbers are starting to look historically absurd. He joined statistical groups previously occupied only by legends like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Shaq. His efficiency, defensive impact, shot blocking, and durability are making people seriously wonder whether he might become the defining superstar of the next era. And perhaps the most uncomfortable detail for LeBron supporters is this. Victor is achieving all of this while actively rejecting many of the modern NBA habits LeBron defended publicly. Wemby rarely foul baits. He embraces contact. He plays through pain quietly. He focuses on efficiency over stat padding. And according to advanced metrics, he already has one of the lowest foul baiting rates among NBA superstars. That contrast became impossible to ignore after a brutal Lakers loss against Houston, where LeBron struggled badly while Victor continued dominating throughout the playoffs. Critics immediately started using those performances as evidence that LeBron's "modern basketball is harder" narrative was collapsing under pressure. And honestly, that's why this controversy became much bigger than just basketball opinions. It turned into a battle between two completely different visions of what greatness means. One side values longevity, branding, media control, and adapting to modern systems. The other values toughness, fundamentals, obsession, durability, and respect for basketball history. Right now, Victor Wembanyama is rapidly becoming the symbol of that second philosophy. And if his rise continues the way it has so far, LeBron James may soon face something even more dangerous than criticism from old legends. He may have to watch the future face of basketball openly reject everything his era stood for. The deeper this entire Victor Wembanyama versus LeBron James situation goes, the more it starts feeling less like a normal basketball debate and more like a full-blown culture war inside the NBA. Because now it is not just fans arguing anymore. The legends themselves are slowly choosing sides. And honestly, the side they seem to be leaning toward is becoming impossible to ignore. One of the biggest reasons older legends are rallying behind Victor Wembanyama is because they believe he represents something the NBA lost years ago: authenticity. While many modern stars carefully manage every public statement like politicians protecting a campaign, Victor comes across like somebody who genuinely cares more about basketball itself than the celebrity machine surrounding it. And that difference has become painfully obvious over the last year. Because while LeBron James spends hours on podcasts discussing eras, narratives, and legacy debates, Victor has been quietly destroying teams on the court while barely saying anything publicly. That contrast alone has already started shifting public perception. Fans are beginning to see Wemby as the old-school grinder who lets basketball speak for itself, while LeBron increasingly looks like a player obsessed with controlling how history remembers him. And honestly, the statistics are only making things worse for LeBron's side of the argument, because Victor is not just putting up flashy numbers. He is producing historic two-way dominance that feels ripped straight out of the 90s. We are talking about a 7'4" player protecting the rim like Hakeem Olajuwon while moving offensively like a guard. The terrifying part is that he is doing all this without relying heavily on foul baiting or modern offensive gimmicks. During the 2026 playoffs, Victor entered one of the most exclusive statistical clubs in basketball history by recording a 35-point, 15-rebound, 5-block playoff performance. Before him, the only players to ever do that were Hakeem, Shaq, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That is not normal superstar territory anymore. That is legendary company. And suddenly fans everywhere started asking an uncomfortable question. If today's era is supposedly harder than ever, then why does Victor look like he belongs perfectly in the brutal old-school environment LeBron claims was easier? That question became even louder because of how Victor scores. Modern basketball is obsessed with three-pointers, spacing, and drawing fouls. But Victor is attacking the game differently. He is dominating through post moves, footwork, mid-range mastery, and defensive intimidation. Exactly the style older legends constantly praise. Watching him feels like watching a blend of Tim Duncan, Hakeem, and Kevin Garnett mixed together inside some impossible futuristic body. And according to reports from around the Spurs organization, that is completely intentional. Greg Popovich reportedly spent years drilling old-school basketball philosophy into Victor's mindset. Pop has always hated how dependent modern basketball became on soft perimeter play and analytics-driven offense. So instead of turning Victor into another giant three-point shooter, Pop allegedly pushed him toward mastering the fundamentals that built previous dynasties: patience, positioning, physicality, and discipline. That philosophy is exactly why older NBA legends have become obsessed with Wemby. Magic Johnson reportedly praised Victor's maturity and basketball IQ publicly after he received the Magic Johnson Award earlier in the season. Magic specifically highlighted the fact that Victor studies the game deeply instead of chasing internet attention. To older legends, that mentality matters almost as much as talent itself. Even Shaquille O'Neal, who spent years criticizing modern centers for being soft, completely changed his opinion once he watched Victor embrace physical basketball. Shaq openly admitted that Wemby might be the first perfect big man the league has ever seen because he combines old-school toughness with modern athletic versatility. And perhaps most importantly, Shaq used Victor as an indirect criticism of LeBron's comments about older eras. Then there's Charles Barkley, who basically turned Victor into a symbol of everything missing from today's NBA. Barkley praised Wemby's willingness to dominate inside instead of floating around the perimeter chasing easy shots. To Charles, Victor represents a return to real basketball, the kind built on contact, fundamentals, and fearlessness. But perhaps the scariest thing about Victor is not even his basketball ability, it's his mentality. Stories about his obsession with improvement honestly sound disturbing in the best possible way. While many modern stars carefully balance basketball with celebrity lifestyles, Victor reportedly lives almost like a monk, obsessed with mastering the sport. Teammates and insiders describe him doing bizarre flexibility routines late at night, studying film obsessively, reading constantly, and treating every aspect of basketball like a science experiment. That mentality instantly reminded older fans of Kobe Bryant. Kobe famously terrified teammates with his obsession. Basketball was not entertainment to him. It was war. And according to many people around the league, Victor carries that exact same energy. Meanwhile, critics believe LeBron increasingly represents the opposite side of NBA culture: branding, narrative management, and constant image control. Fair or unfair, that perception has grown massively over the last few seasons, especially because every time LeBron struggles, new reports about injuries, recovery, or physical limitations suddenly appear almost immediately afterward. Victor, however, has built a completely different reputation already. Earlier this season, he played through a twisted ankle during the playoffs without making a huge public spectacle out of it. No dramatic interviews, no excuses, no social media campaign. He simply kept playing. And older legends absolutely love that mentality because it reminds them of the era they came from. That contrast became brutally obvious during one of the Spurs-Lakers matchups earlier this year. Victor completely dominated the game, scoring 40 points and grabbing 15 rebounds while repeatedly attacking LeBron directly. There were moments where he hit fadeaways over LeBron on one possession, then sprinted back and blocked him at the rim on the next. Watching it honestly felt symbolic, like basketball history slowly shifting from one era into another in real time. And then came the moment that truly shocked NBA fans everywhere. During All-Star Media Day, a reporter asked Victor whether he would cry when LeBron eventually retires. Most young stars would have responded emotionally or respectfully. Instead, Victor simply answered no without hesitation and moved on immediately. That one-word answer spread across social media instantly because fans interpreted it as Victor rejecting the idea that the league still revolves around LeBron James. And honestly, the timing could not have been worse for LeBron because around the same period, his performances started fueling even more criticism. One particularly ugly game against Houston became a disaster for his supporters after LeBron struggled badly in a must-win situation while Victor continued looking unstoppable elsewhere in the playoffs. Suddenly, fans everywhere started questioning the entire modern era is harder, argument. Because if today's game is supposedly more demanding than Jordan's era, then why are players like Victor thriving through old-school fundamentals while LeBron struggles against younger teams using the same soft defensive systems he defended publicly? That question is exactly why this debate exploded beyond normal basketball discussion. It stopped being about statistics alone. It became about identity. What kind of basketball deserves respect? The polished modern version built around spacing, foul manipulation, and media narratives, or the brutal old-school version built around toughness, fundamentals, and survival. Right now, Victor Wembanyama, he wants something much simpler and honestly much scarier. He wants basketball greatness in its purest form. And that is exactly why so many old-school legends are gravitating toward him. To them, Victor feels like a throwback to an era where players obsessed over dominating opponents instead of dominating headlines. You can see it every time he steps on the court. He plays angry. He plays physical. He plays like somebody trying to prove a point every single possession. Meanwhile, the modern NBA has slowly become more focused on efficiency charts, foul baiting, load management, and highlight clips designed for social media algorithms. And whether people want to admit it or not, many fans are starting to feel exhausted by it. That's why Victor's rise feels different. It feels personal. He represents the possibility that basketball can still return to something raw and competitive instead of looking like a carefully managed entertainment product. And the most uncomfortable part for LeBron supporters is that Wemby is proving you can dominate this era without embracing all the theatrics that came with it. Because while LeBron spent years mastering the art of controlling the narrative around himself, Victor is letting the game speak for him naturally. No endless podcast explanations, no carefully timed leaks about injuries after bad losses, no constant reminders about how hard the modern game supposedly is. Victor simply shows up, plays through contact, dominates, and leaves. That difference in mentality is exactly why the younger generation is starting to split into two sides. One side still sees LeBron as the ultimate modern superstar, the businessman, the icon, the longevity king who transformed player empowerment forever. But the other side is beginning to look at Victor as something much more dangerous. Not just another superstar, but a correction to what the NBA became over the last decade. And honestly, the numbers are making that argument impossible to ignore. Victor is already putting up historic defensive metrics while scoring efficiently in ways that barely make sense for somebody his size. He's protecting the rim like a prime Shaquille O'Neal while moving offensively like a wing player. But what terrifies the rest of the league even more is that he is still learning. He is still only scratching the surface of what he could become. That's why this whole LeBron debate may end up aging horribly in hindsight, because while LeBron was busy trying to convince people the modern NBA is harder than ever, Victor quietly became living proof that old-school fundamentals still dominate when mastered properly. Mid-range footwork, defensive intensity, toughness, efficiency, discipline. Victor is bringing all of it back. And every time he dominates another nationally televised game, more fans start questioning whether the modern NBA really evolved forward or just became softer. And maybe that is the biggest reason this drama exploded so violently online. Deep down, many fans were already frustrated with the direction basketball was heading. Endless three-pointers, constant flopping, superstars sitting out games, players caring more about friendships than rivalries. Victor Wembanyama arrived at the perfect moment because he feels like the complete opposite of all that. He feels competitive in a way that reminds older fans why they fell in love with basketball to begin with. Even the legends can sense it. Charles Barkley, Kevin Garnett, Magic Johnson, and Shaq are not praising Victor just because he is talented. The league has seen talented players before. They are praising him because they believe he respects the game itself, and in their eyes, that respect matters more than any statistic ever will. Meanwhile, LeBron's position becomes more complicated every single year. Because no matter how incredible his career has been, the criticism surrounding him is no longer disappearing. More fans are starting to question whether his constant need to shape public perception has actually damaged parts of his legacy. And if Victor continues rising while openly embracing the exact opposite mentality, The comparisons will only become more brutal moving forward. That's why this upcoming era could completely reshape the GOAT debate forever. Because if the future face of basketball openly respects Jordan's generation more than LeBron's generation, then suddenly LeBron's entire argument about modern basketball superiority starts collapsing from the inside. And honestly, that might be the scariest part for LeBron James. Victor Wembanyama is not trying to become the next LeBron. He's trying to erase the idea that the NBA ever needed another one in the first place. And if the rest of the league isn't careful, this 7'4" monster obsessed with old-school basketball might end up becoming something even more terrifying than the next superstar. He might become the player who brings the NBA back to war again.